I'm glad you all are able to join us tonight. We're going to walk through briefly what is going into the Urban Forest Management Plan project, and then we will hopefully open it up for discussion and get some feedback from you all. I'm curious, we have 6 attendees. Thank you, Abby. I'm just curious, I know we have folks from the city and residents on the chat. So thank you all for joining. If you're either a resident or work with the city, either way, we're glad you're with us, and please feel free to jump in and join the conversation. We really hope to have a conversation and be able to talk about your concerns or issues or things you'd like to see in the city of Temecula. So go ahead and click the next slide, Abby. So Abby Beisinger's on the call. She's one of our urban forestry analysts with DUDEC, and we also have Stacy Fox with the City of Temecula joining as well. Go ahead and next slide. Just real briefly, we're going to go through, like I said, developing the urban forest management plan, but we really hopefully want to spend most of our time having a discussion with the group. If you're a resident and you have a specific individual concern for your property, we'll try and get you connected with the city staff member to address that after the meeting. If you're, if you would want to try and keep the conversation focused on larger issues with the city and with citywide trees, and just ask that you can be respectful of everyone's time. So if you would like to click the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen there, we can recognize that you would like to speak and allow you to do that and speak to the group. If you want to type a question, there's the Q&A button down below as well, and we can answer that question live, or we can again answer it in the chat box. All right, so what goes into an urban forest management plan? Real simply, it's a vision for the city's trees. We're creating this long-term document so we can help you as Temecula residents and city staff have those healthy tree-lined streets that you would like to see in your community. We're going to give a framework for how to achieve that vision using short, medium, long-term goals. So really have well-defined, clear steps of how we're going to get from where we are now to where we want to be. Part of the document is that it's important that we understand that's adaptive, that things will change. We learned, especially the last year, we don't know what the next challenge or issue will be, but that when those do arise, we need to take a moment to reflect on what the current condition is and see if our plans still align with the current conditions, and if they need to be changed, then we change those. And the UFMPs are, really analysis of what's going on in the city and different components of the inventory, management practices, funding, all these different things that we're going to take a look at to understand where we're at and how to get to where we need to go. So what are some of those specific steps? Doing an inventory and assessing the urban forest. Right now, there's an inventory being completed of all publicly managed trees. That should be completed by the end of April, and be able to review that data and get an understanding of what the current condition of the trees are and how they are progressing towards sustainable urban forests. We're going to look at all the ordinances, policies, management practices, programs, anything development review, anything that goes into tree management on public, private property. We're going to take a look at all those issues and see, again, do they align with the goals of the city and how we want to increase healthy large trees in the community. Understanding community member priorities is a really important part of putting together an urban forest management plan. We want to know what people need and how we can get resources to direct it towards those issues. And then finally, setting goals for the city tree program and setting a canopy cover goal. We want to have that number, that long-term number that says, that we have a smart, realistic goal for a canopy cover, so we know what we want to get to, and then we can define the steps that it'll take to get to that point. Go ahead, next slide. So where we're at right now, like I said, we're completing a city-wide inventory with the company Arbor Pro, our consultant on this project. Can be completed by the end of April. We have a community survey that's live. We have about 500 responses so far from residents participating in that survey. In May, we're going to speak directly with all the city staff and stakeholders that impact trees in the city to understand the intricate ways that staff work together, how effective the programs and policies are in actuality and in being implemented, so we can get a clear picture of how things can be improved and what's working well. And then we're also going to begin in May doing a canopy cover study of the city, so we can understand exactly how much of the city is covered by trees, so we can start setting long-term goals. So like I said, we've had our community survey up for a month now, and we have close to 500 responses. Go ahead. So we have 485 responses so far. And the city's been posting about once a week on the different social media outlets that they have advertisements or postings about the survey, and it's been getting a good response every time. Has some of our preliminary data at the bottom, just of the demographics that almost everybody that's taken the surveys has indicated that they live in the city. Most of them, almost all of them, are single-family homeowners and are English speakers. Some more of our preliminary results. One of the questions was trying to get at what should be the goals of this management plan. Like I said, we want to know what people care about, what their values are, and how we can best address that through our management plan. And as you can see here, there's a almost pretty even mix amongst the different options, with maintaining existing trees being the highest priority, reducing the number of trees removed every year being the lowest priority, but really not one big standout amongst the options. A lot of very similar responses amongst the groups here. So nothing yet that we can pinpoint to that we really would like to try and focus on. Again, trying to understand how as a city in developing this management plan, how can we understand what it is that residents need so they can plant and care for trees on their own property and have healthy trees where they live. And so as we see here, education materials is what residents were most looking for, or respondents were most looking for, followed by financial support for tree trimming. So these are things that, as we're developing the plan, going through our interviews, talking more with residents and having more community engagement meetings, that we will be looking to understand with the community members what that means, what does it look like, and how we can develop goals and strategies to accomplish those things. So then some of our part of the survey, there was a section to just write in individual comments. And so these were some of the comments that we had received. You can't have too many trees. Somebody indicated they would like to see nut and fruit trees in the yard or in the community. Prioritizing native trees, something we hear often from community members. Not a big fan of the eucalyptus tree. More trees, but having issues with going through HOA regulations. And then, this person is saying that they love the tree lined streets, and that was a big point of why they wanted to live here. And I think that's something that's really great to highlight, is that trees are an important part of a community, an important part of the look and feel, and it very much can be an inviting characteristic that will help people want to live in that city. So that was a great one to end off there. So just moving forward, if you're looking for ways to get involved, or you want to get some of your fellow residents involved, we have the survey still open. We have a Spanish survey as well, Spanish language survey as well. That's on the SurveyMonkey website. And if you have questions for the city, you can contact or email Stacy Fox. And if you have questions about the Urban Forest Management Plan, you can contact me directly. And with that, I will turn it over to Abby.
All right, thanks so much, Ryan. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to getting into a little bit more discussion, a little bit more interactivity together. So for this next portion, we really just want to hear from you. A big reason of why we're holding this community meeting is to speak directly with Temecula residents about what they want to see trees look like in their community in the next 20 to 50 years. We as consultants recognize that we're guests in your community. We don't live there. And so we can really only help the communities speak to what they want sort of by hearing from you. And so that's hopefully what we'll be here to talk about today. Given that we've all been living in a Zoom world for a very long time, I think a number of us are aware of sort of meeting controls and things like that. But if you have a question, feel free to type it into the chat, or we also have a Q&A feature. And then there's also a raise hand function, so you can feel free to raise your hand, and if you would prefer to speak. There are not that many of us on the call today, so really whatever feels most comfortable for you. But we like to start off just sort of a little softball question to get us thinking about what trees do for us in a community, just in general. So we wanted to know, how do trees most benefit you in your daily life on a daily basis? And some of these examples could include shading and cooling, financial benefits like lowering your energy costs, especially in a place like Temecula, health benefits like cleaner air and water or improved health, habitat for wildlife and birds, or beauty in your local park or neighborhood. So did anyone want to address sort of how you feel trees benefit you specifically in Temecula, or just generally in the world? Anyone have ideas?
Abby, I'll just add really quickly, we do have one call-in phone number. So if that person would like to speak, they'd have to press *9 to raise their hand.
Perfect, thank you, Dana. Great, we have from Catherine, all of the above, love it. I feel the same way. I guess there could be some other things that trees do for you in your neighborhood, or benefits, but maybe we'll put this one on the to sort of frame our thinking and ask a few more specific questions to Temecula, and specifically how you want trees to be an ever-present community force. So how would you like to see trees look in your neighborhood in the next 20 years? Or what do you most value about trees in your neighborhood? oops, went too far. So maybe two of these questions, do any of these speak a little bit more to you? Are there specific species of trees that you would love to see lining your streets? Or are there specific aspects about trees that are on your exact city block or area that you live in? Would you like to see more trees in the city, less trees in the city? Some of those questions. Anyone have ideas? We have some timid participants today. Maybe you didn't know it was going to be an interactive panel. Great, we have a comment from Catherine. So in my neighborhood, I appreciate trees that are large enough to help contribute to privacy. That's a really great point, and something that we often see with trees sort of serving as living fences or living walls. Does anyone else have that need? Do people like seeing trees as privacy screens, or different ways to make trees creative to fit within your community? We heard a couple of mentions of HOAs and things. Are there issues that you have within your HOA that you would like to see things change if you do live in an HOA? So maybe we will ask another question that is on the same topic. So one of the, or sort of in the same topic, but maybe gives you a little bit more thought. So one of our questions in the community survey was about encouraging residents to think about increasing or having trees on your property. So are there certain reasons why you might be sort of not sure or resistant or hesitant to planting trees on your property? And we put down some ideas here, sort of cost to trim trees, cost to water trees. Maybe there's mess or leaf litter that you're not so happy about due to a certain kind of species. Maybe damage to sewer and water pipes or sidewalks, risk to damage by falling branches, any of those that either physically on your property, or maybe there are certain trees that you're not as interested in having on your city street, your block. Great, so we have some other ideas there. So mess and leaf litter are a consideration factor for me in the type of tree to plant. Great. And then also root damage from Matt Peters. Thanks. Those are both really great contributions. Catherine, if you were interested in speaking, I can unmute you, and if you wanted, you could talk a little bit about maybe the mess, or like, are there certain species that you try to avoid that you might not be as interested in planting? Or Matt, if you wanted to talk about, are there certain trees that you see constantly, and you don't need to necessarily know the species name, but we can maybe help you think of what it is. Could either type it in. Okay, great. Catherine, I can unmute you now. And you should be all set. You'll just have to unmute yourself.
Hello, good evening.
Hi.
When I mentioned the leaf litter as a consideration, we actually have the neighbors behind us. We have new neighbors that just purchased the home, and last week they decided to remove every bit of vegetation in their backyard. I think they're going to replant. So all the beautiful trees that provided privacy, contributed to the privacy between the properties, are gone. And now that my husband and I are kind of over the initial shock, because we loved the trees, we're starting to assess and think about, okay, well, we want to plant a few more trees now in our backyard to compensate for these missing trees. But what we did notice as we started to assess, the trees that our neighbors had were very large and had a lot of large leaves, and we have a lot of leaf litter on our slope that ended up killing off a lot of our ground cover. So that's something that we realized we need to take into consideration as we look towards planting another, some trees on our property to compensate. Something that we didn't realize, and we also realized that the really large trees were also shading our ground cover too much. And so it was causing other vegetation to not grow. So that the leaf litter is something that we really want to take a consideration into what we plant next.
Got it. Thanks. That's a really, really great point to bring up. And yeah, definitely sort of wondering how our community members or neighbors, how the trees in each other's yard might have an impact on us. We might not even be aware of it until it's gone. Eric, I see you have a question here or a comment. I have 3 trees in my front yard, which I love. The trees on the back of my property, on city property, leave a mess in my backyard. I have a pool, and the leaf litter has increased costs to me in pool management. Love trees, but there is a cost to the resident. Trees too close to foundation could cost a problem to sidewalk, property fencing, property foundation and fencing. These are all really great points, and really good for us to know. The 2 residents have brought up now sort of the leaf litter or additional maintenance that could potentially come with trees, especially if they're planted in areas that might not be the right fit for the tree. If the tree is too large for the planting site, the planting space, and that's definitely something that we can look at moving forward to address while we develop this urban forestry management plan. I'll refer to it as a UFMP. Moving forward to help plan and look at even pruning or maintenance techniques that the city uses moving forward. So I have a few other questions sort of on that same line. Now, one thing that we didn't directly talk about yet, this will come up a little bit more. So the city only has a finite amount of planting space. City planted trees can grow on city streets and parks and other city maintained property like medians. And there are only a certain amount of planting locations that the city can plant. So the city owned trees really is finite. And in a city like Temecula that wants to increase its canopy cover, the majority of trees in a city really do exist on private property. And so the city is looking at its management plan right now to work directly with community members to help understand some of the concerns that residents have around growing trees or increasing canopy cover, and then policies and procedures and practices that will help the city work together with its residents to have canopy cover growth within the future. So we're wondering a couple of questions. There are barriers to the UFMP process or the vision to increasing canopy cover in Temecula. So we have a couple of questions around that we'd love your feedback on as well. Sort of what barriers do you experience that prevent you from growing or planting or maintaining trees at your residence or within your neighborhood or surrounding community? Are there parklets or high density plantings or high density housing in a neighborhood that you live that prevents large trees from growing or providing shade? And a couple other questions for you to think about. How can the city help you have large, healthy trees at your residence, neighborhood, or surrounding community? And these are specific to the city of Temecula. So could the city help you understand how to grow trees better? Could the city have different tree programs like community education programs, or provide residents with free trees or offsets on different ways to plant trees in your community? And also, are there more broad citywide issues you see that have a negative impact on trees? We talked a little bit about this, residents being able to cut down all of the trees in their backyard or things like that. Are there other issues that you see in places in the city where trees are either cut down, or maybe there are blatant places in the city that really are too hot and lack tree cover? Anything like that? And again, if anyone wants to either raise their hand, you don't need to type everything into the chat or the Q&A feature. You could also just speak if that is more your cup of tea, whatever works for us. So sounds like not so many thought. Ryan, I saw you unmuted. You can go ahead.
Yeah, we got one raised hand for
great.
Matt Peters.
Perfect. I will allow you to talk, Matt. Go right ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Hey everyone, can you hear me?
Yes.
So I'm a coworker of Stacy's.
Great.
I'm a planner, and we're working on a general plan update. And just wanted to make, I guess, a couple comments. The first, to answer the question about maybe where we can see some trees, and I've already mentioned this to Stacy, but I think a lot of our sports parks, there's definitely an opportunity to increase the tree canopy in our sports parks. People come to watch softball or soccer games, and I think without an easy up in the car, it's hard to find shade, especially during the summer. So that's kind of my general comment, more as a resident and less as a staff member.
Sure.
But also just wanted to say the city's updating its general plan. It hasn't been updated since 2005. And part of that process includes an EIR and a climate action plan. And I'm wondering through this process, if there's going to be a way to identify how much trees mitigate in terms of CO2 or greenhouse gas, because I see value in this process as relates to the general plan and meeting some of those state mandated requirements. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on that and how I might be able to work with Stacy to integrate some of this into the general plan.
Definitely. So I'll give the first answer, and then Ryan or Dana, if you wanted to chime in as well. So the city, we're finishing up, working with Arbor Pro, finishing up the citywide tree inventory. Once we get the tree inventory completed, there is a software called iTree Eco, which you're able to input all of the tree inventory data into, and then it's able to tabulate and calculate exactly what you just asked. So carbon sequestration, avoided stormwater runoff, pollution mitigation. There are a couple of other things that we can quantify directly based on the type of species and the amount of trees that are present within the city. Now, of course, that information will only be from the city-owned trees, because that's what the city inventory is conducting. It's only on city-owned property, but it will be able to give help meet some of those state requirements and help understand and really see the environmental benefits and services that the trees provide in a quantifiable amount, both in units, but also in dollars. So really how those environmental benefits translate into being an economic asset, not only for the asset value of the trees themselves, but also the environmental services that they provide. Ryan or Dana, did you want to add anything that I might have missed there?
I think the only other thing on the carbon sequestration part of it too is there's what, and the other, talking with iTree, and the reason we use iTree is it's developed by the U.S. Forest Service. It's peer reviewed. It's the best available tool for urban foresters to figure out carbon sequestration and carbon capture storage in trees. But you can also do projections, 40-year projections of trees that you're planting. So as the city is working through its trees that it's planting for the CAL FIRE grant that funded this program, or funded this UFMP project, but also looking at the environmental benefit that trees are going to have in putting together a tree planting program, we can quantify and estimate what that long-term environmental benefit will be over a 40-year period.
Okay. That sounds good. I think sounds like it's getting a little technical, and I can maybe work behind the scenes with Stacy and you folks to gather that information, but I appreciate you answering the question.
Sure, definitely. Yes, we can wax and wane about environmental benefits for a long time. Thanks, Matt.
Mhm.
I did see a comment there from Eric, which was that trees with a small root system that is controlled would be better. I see some of the large trees around the city on personal property where the roots are exposed, causing damage to the yards. So this is a great point, and sometimes a common misconception that we need trees that have smaller roots so that they can cause less damage to infrastructure and sidewalks and pipes and home foundations and all of those things. There's a great simple phrase called right tree, right place, which is a classic term that basically means putting a tree in a place that it can grow and thrive and not have any of those conflicts with any of those infrastructure that I mentioned. And so you mentioned specifically personal property that some of this is happening, and what could be occurring is sometimes people really like a small tree in their area that they think is going to grow great, and they buy it in maybe a 1 gallon or 5 gallon pot. And then lo and behold, the tree is a species that can grow extremely large, and then it's going to rip up your sidewalk or mess up your home foundation. And so it's really about educating community members to pick the trees that's going to be the best for their area. And another part of that is also encouraging the city, if you are, Eric, if you're seeing that on city streets too, if there are specific places where sidewalk is bulging up or things like that, sometimes trees get planted in tree wells or tree cutouts that are too small for the roots. The tree is too big to grow in that space, and trees are mighty forces and can just bust up concrete or different things like that. But that's a great point, and speaks a little bit to the need for education, the need for education and educational programming for residents on right tree, right place, and ways to achieve two things at once: beautiful trees that don't mess up your sidewalks. Catherine, I see you have a hand. I will let you unmute yourself. Go right ahead.
Yes, I wanted to just say I concur with what you're saying, and I really appreciate it about education. I'm currently in a home. Oh, we're going on 10 years in our home, but it was a new home, a new build. So we had to do our backyard. And I don't know trees. I don't know plants. I didn't know what to plant. It was really just a landscaper going, what do you think looks pretty? What would you like? So it would have been great if there was some resource, either a section on the city's website or a brochure we could have gone to City Hall to pick up that kind of gave us some education of, these are the type of trees that do well in this type of environment, where we live. These are some ideas for drought and low water usage trees. That would have been something that would have been very helpful for us when we landscaped.
Great, thanks so much for bringing that up. Is there anyone else on the call that agrees that, you think trees are great, but maybe don't know much about them, or maybe want to know more about what trees are really well suited for the climate and weather within Temecula? Eric and Catherine, our star participants, agree. Excellent. Okay, great. So I'm a little bit more on that. Would either of you be interested in, or anyone else, even if you're like Matt, a city employee, but also a resident, like either community workshops or community tree days or tree planting events where you would learn more about trees and how to properly water them, how to properly care for them, and also, anything else that goes along with that, or even tree health, tree pests and diseases. Has anyone ever had any issues with that?
Can I speak?
Yeah, please.
I'm going to be honest with you, Abby. I don't
Yeah.
want to get my hands dirty. I want to pay someone to plant the tree for me.
Sure. Okay, so no, that's great.
So a workshop wouldn't be the best for me. But one thing that you're mentioning that I'm hearing from this, my husband and I love oak trees, and we know oak trees are in the same area and native, and so we planted 3 beautiful oak trees in our backyard. But I am starting to look at them 10 years later and going, how big are these oak trees going to get? Am I going to be able to maintain a tree of this size on my tract home lot?
Do you remember the species of oak?
Oh, I don't know.
Because
They might have
something
been
like
live oaks.
Yeah, so live oaks can grow very big, right? But like something like a holly oak, it's much smaller. But I do love, but both Eric and you mentioned sort of guidance for landscapers in the community. I'm wondering maybe from Stacy, if you can mention if the city has maybe a listing of vetted or landscapers or contractors that are supported by the, not supported financially, but sort of that the city utilizes, or maybe if there are resources that the city shares with landscapers or landscape companies or contractors.
Currently, we do not, but part of this management plan is to kind of develop our website to have a landing page for residents and landscapers to go to for a resource on what trees work in Temecula. What's the best tree for my front yard and stuff. And then the city, myself, my staff, we're a great resource. We know what works well in the city, and we're always here, more willing and able to assist the community and residents on kind of help directing them and educating them on tree and tree care. So, but like I said, with this management plan, really it's to build that web page, a good resource for our community to go to, and develop that the community outreach programs and tree planting days and Arbor Day and stuff like that. That would be great to bring the community in, just even if they don't want to get their hands dirty, just to see it in action and get some good information on what works for Temecula. So
Definitely. Great. Catherine, I see your hand is raised again. Feel free to unmute.
I was just gonna say, I would appreciate having those resources, not so much the landscapers. I think we have a lot of different landscaping companies, but an arborist. We're looking to get some of our trees trimmed now. And what we've learned from our past experiences, I don't want to just call a general landscaper that's going to chop off the top of my tree and say it's trimmed. I'm looking for an actual arborist that's going to come in, assess the health of the tree, and is going to thin it and trim it for its growth and its health, if that makes sense. So having like a list of like actual arborists that are in our community that we could call in would be appreciated.
That's great feedback, and you hit the nail on the head that anyone can have a chainsaw and prune your tree, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's doing so in a way that's going to encourage the tree to continue to grow or maintain the health or life of the tree even. So definitely great feedback about maybe having local arborists that are in the area that could be on the city website or something like that. That's great. Anyone else have anything else they wanted to bring up? We're coming sort of down to the end of our meeting. These were the last of my brilliant questions. But if there's any other ideas or thoughts, again, we'll be doing. We have an open line of communication with Ryan Allen, who spoke before about our if you wanted to share any information that comes up or any ideas that you thought, like Matt, who shared about the different sports parks, like looking at vacant tree sites within the sports parks and places that we can increase canopy there. Feel free to reach out. We also have out, I can advance one of our last slides here. Again, we have our survey, and I am pulling it up there. We have our survey. It is in both English and Spanish. So if you are on the call now and you want to do us a favor and post it to your own Facebook or other community social network that you use, even Nextdoor or things like that, feel free to, so we can get the best swath of information from all sorts of Temecula residents. And then here again is our contact information. Stacy, who you just heard from, you can email him there. And then also for any questions about the UFMP, Ryan is there. But if there are other questions or feedback, feel free to continue bringing anything up that you might be interested in. And otherwise, I think that might be it. Ryan or Stacy, did you have any other things you wanted to bring up?
No, I just wanted to thank you everybody for hanging in there. I again apologize for that delay. That was just me making a mistake. So I thank you for hanging in there for those couple minutes. I'm really glad you did, because that was a very fruitful conversation. I know I learned a lot from hearing from you all, and we will have more engagement opportunities. Hopefully it looks like we'll get to do some in-person ones as COVID restrictions change over the next, hopefully over the next few months, to where we can have in-person meetings. We want to do that so we can sit down and talk with you one-on-one or in group settings and really understand what you what would be helpful. So thank you. I don't know if Stacy, if you wanted to make a comment before we head out. I'll give you the last word, and then we'll close it down.
Just want to thank everybody that participated in the survey and everybody here in this our first community outreach meeting via Zoom. Appreciate the comments and feedback, and it's very helpful and informative. So thanks again.
All right, take care, everyone.